Hi, I'm Rosala Mosing. I'm a somatic-based whole life leadership and presence coach.
And I'm Ellen Palmer. I'm a regenerative leadership coach and strategic advisor for purpose-driven women. We're coaches.
And also friends. Welcome to the Presence Hour.
We have cleared this hour to become present to what is and invite you to join us in a lively conversation. We'll explore what is coming up for us and illustrate how cultivating presence can help us gain new insights, perspectives, and ways forward. Let's come together and take the mystery out of presence by getting ourselves there now.
Take a deep breath into your heart, and from here, we'll begin.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
I needed that deep breath to arrive in this moment in my heart.
Yeah.
I want to do it again.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. If you're listening, we invite you to take a deep breath with us into your heart. And from here, we will begin.
Yeah, that was really settling.
That totally hits home on what so Rosala and I just briefly talked this time. Sometimes we talk more before we turn on recording, and sometimes we talk less. And today we barely spoke at all. We have kind of something that we've both been playing with separately. I think we're just going to dive into and see where the conversation goes.
Yeah.
Does that sound good?
It does. Before we launch, though, I'd love to do a brief mood check.
Yeah.
So where are you right now, Ellen?
Last month I was in, like the wild horses pulling me in a bunch of different directions. And now I feel a little bit like a ping pong or a pinball in a pinball game. Boing, boing, boing. Like I'm on a flat surface, but I'm like, it's just like, I'm doing this and then I'm pivoting and I'm doing this. And it's fun. Kind of like the playfulness of the game of going around and watching me like, okay, I'm doing that. And all right, now I'm going to get this side. And
interesting.
Yeah, so that's how I am right now. How about you?
I love that. It's funny. I'm also, coming into this, there's been some stuff going on in my life that I anticipated that I might feel a little anxious or unsettled. And what I'm actually experiencing right now is also there's some joyfulness and some playfulness. So interesting how that happens.
Yeah, maybe it has to do with the topic, what we've been working on.
Maybe.
Okay, so here's the topic. A coaching client of mine, as she left coaching, she was going to focus on a commitment statement that she was going to orient to, and it was, I deserve to be at ease. Yeah. So I've been playing around with that, and Rosala and I talked maybe just a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
And I threw that out. We were in a conversation with another coach friend of ours that we meet on a monthly basis and chat. And Rosala, you said that do you want to start with saying how you kind of modified it? What came up for you with the statement?
Yeah. So I recognize it's, for me, I have an ongoing exploration with this idea of deserve. And so for me, I think it starts with the idea of deserve is helpful because I've been working for some time on self-compassion. And I think it's helpful to think about maybe allowing myself or that I am worthy of the ease. But my mind starts to play tricks about deserve and what does that mean? And then who's obligated to give it to me? And so it naturally just evolved immediately for me into I can choose to be at ease, which I think is sort of the tail end of that progression of me working on that self-compassion and allowing myself to have good things. Like I can recognize now that I previously had this pattern or belief that life is hard. Things have to, you have to work hard to get things. And so I'm recognizing that was a mindset and at some level a choice, and I can choose differently now. And that all sort of, I don't think I would have recognized that without having had the conversation. I noticed that I sometimes just do these things and don't always take the time to recognize. So it's helpful, these conversations that we have, that I can, oh yeah, I'm doing that. Let me see how I can be more intentional with that now.
Yeah. And that's what this podcast is all about, is really like getting into the nitty gritty of how we can be intentional about whatever it is that we want to focus on. So, and part of that, is the slowing down. So I want to go back to, I said, I deserve to be at ease. And like feeling how that lands in your body. And then let's try the one that you came up with. Will you say that statement and see how it lands?
Yeah. So I'll give just a pause to take that moment with that word deserve and notice maybe sensations or thoughts that arise. And then just notice if anything is different as you invite the idea of I can choose to be at ease. And just check in with any slight shift of sensation in your body or any thought or judgment that comes up around either of those. What are you noticing, Ellen?
Similar to you with the word deserve, when I said, but just all of a sudden semantics came into it for me.
Yeah.
But a little different is that when I thought of I choose to be, it wasn't like present for me. It seemed like an option out there.
Okay.
So then I moved it to, so let's try this one on, everybody. I am at ease. Yeah, that instantly grounded me and slowed me down.
Interesting.
And the feeling in my chest became still.
Yeah. And so I love that we're two different people sharing this experience, because I'll say that as I oriented to I am at ease, I think my initial reaction was maybe the opposite. The longer I sit with it, the more I get there. But my initial reaction was, oh no, pressure. I don't know if I am completely at ease right now. And does it? So yeah. it kind of amped me up and got me a little bit out of the ease, because it felt like a command as opposed to me having agency over it in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I do love this too, what you just said about how it is landing so differently for both of us and for everyone listening. If the point is, if you're into this, not to say that you have to be into ease, but that's what we're into right now. And we can go into more about why, but it's how does it help you to find a phrase? The idea of having a phrase or a mantra or something you're reorienting to is I always go back to what lands in your body. How does it land for you? And when something lands. And so that's what for me, it's oh, I am. And and if it's, I choose for you. So it's if you're listening to this, or you obviously are listening to this if you're hearing this. Is what lands for you. Get a phrase, and if it's not ease, what is the thing that you are wanting right now more of in your life? And come up with a phrase that it really feels like it's accessible and in the present moment, with you, rather than something out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a common language that you and I maybe share that we often relate to is I am committed to, or I am a commitment to this thing. And that can be helpful for me too, because then it makes it, like you were saying, it's not something that's sort of a wish out there that can happen to me, but it's something that I'm authoring in my life. But again, that, see how it lands for you. Does that, I have a goal of, I am committed to, I am this thing, right? Just try them all on, see how your body responds.
I'm glad you brought up the authoring. You said authoring. And just to expand that a little bit, that there's stages of adult development for those of you who aren't aware of it. But people have researched this. They have different theories. But I love, talking about self-authoring, that's really what Rosa and I are talking about in this podcast, about presence and about why are we focusing on turning towards difficulty, or why are we focusing on cultivating something we want ease and using our intention and choice, is that we are authors of our own lives. We are creators. We create our reality. So even if there's hectic, so this is what brought up the ease thing for me, is that even if there's hectic things going on in your life, because there always will be, unless you're a Buddha sitting on the mountain somewhere, or whatever that imagery is, that we can choose to be at ease. within, whatever is happening, that it's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times in my life, anyway, I'll just speak about me. In my life, it felt like it wasn't a choice. That let's just talk about my professional life. Like, I'm at work doing a job and doing tasks, and there's lots of different issues and problems and deadlines. And I will say my old self in that career situation was, kind of anxious, I got to get this done. I got to get this done. And it's, part of what drives and motivates you, and you need some adrenaline or something, for, doing things. But like, to what end is what, I'm kind of playing with now, after I took, a career break and was coaching for 3 years and really cultivating ease as a normal way of being. Mm-hmm. And then re-entering the workforce, having this kind of, the same kind of responsibilities that do, I went back to my old self of and then that, and then this, and then I got to do this. And being like, what would it feel like to do the same thing, but feel at ease while I'm doing it? Because, and will it have the same outcome?
Yeah.
And I've been experimenting with it for a few weeks, and it actually helps me with the outcomes, rather than, thinking that that excitement or something, or, some other kind of, undue pressure. It's not like I have a boss leaning over my shoulder when I'm going to get this done, but I kind of have that internal boss all the time in my head being like, all right, is it good enough? And are you doing it? And are you doing it fast enough? And, what else can you get done today? And kind of being like, oh, okay, just letting that go and doing the same things, but with this sense of ease that feels really different in my body.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think this is something that comes up so frequently with many of the clients I'm working with, is this sense of needing to have this anxiety, adrenaline drive to achieve. And so I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about how you're getting there to be able to let that go and orient to this sense of ease, what that means for you, how you do it. And then obviously you mentioned that it is having a positive impact and the results are desirable. So yeah, I'd love to just hear a little bit more.
Yeah. I'll start in the beginning with, how, when you want to welcome something in, like I say, I can shift now with that statement to say, I deserve to feel at ease. And I'm a big lover of sticky notes. So I have a little Post-it note when I got into this, and I was like, just to remind myself, so I can glance at it once in a while. And I take that breath like we did in the beginning. I kind of arrive in the moment and say, and I feel that ease land in my body. Oh, we got a little frozen on Rosala. Oh, there you are again. You froze for just a second.
Yeah. So I heard you say you arrive in the moment.
Yeah. So I arrive in the moment and I say that statement and I feel at ease. So I can feel what that is. And then I can orient to that and change my way of being. But before that just, doesn't happen on accident, is that you have to know what feeling at ease feels like in the first place. With the clients I work with anyway, a lot of times any kind of aspirational, anything you're working on in coaching, it's like, well, I can't feel that. That's why I'm here. I don't know what that is. And that's why I want it.
Yeah.
And so it's practicing. So then I immediately go to a question like, when was the last time you felt at ease? Or what is a memory where you felt at ease? Is there a certain location? I find locations are useful. I think we might have talked about this in previous episodes, that I have the shores of Lake Superior, which I live in Minnesota. Lake Superior is my place. It's the largest freshwater lake in the world. So it looks kind of like an ocean, rocky cliffs. And so in the long sandy beaches with beach dunes. So it's that's when I look out at that lake, I feel at ease from all the times that I've been there. Yeah. And so that's what I'm kind of accessing, and that body memory is coming back when I just say that statement. So I think the first step for listeners is to really think about when was the last time you felt at ease? Or is there a place or a situation where you typically feel at ease? I turn it to you and ask you maybe what an example of yours would be.
maybe we'll work through this together in real time. Because like I said earlier, sometimes I just do these things without necessarily being able to cognitively articulate it. And so my curiosity immediately went to, is there a distinction between ease and relaxation, or are they the same thing? And I feel like there's a distinction. I'm curious about your thought about that. But so I'll just share for a recent example of mine is that in the last couple of weeks, my mother-in-law was hospitalized unexpectedly. And we weren't sure if she was going to make it. And so there was a lot of fear, there was me needing to be present for my partner as he was orienting to this possibility of losing his mother. There was needing to be present for her and to oversee the care she was getting, because there were some errors that were happening that could have been life-threatening. And so we wanted to be very present for that. I also have a very elderly, somewhat sick dog at home. And so there was a lot going on. And so I will say I certainly didn't feel relaxed in any of that. But what I noticed is, as I was able to just stay with my breath, stay with the reality. So I noticed that there was a lot of, on my partner's part, projecting out like, I'm not sure she's going to make it and what's going to happen. And for some reason I was able, and at the time I attributed it to maybe because it's not my mom, but I think it's really my years of practice with presence. I was able to say, well, in this moment, we don't know that. In this moment, she's still got at least a 50-50 shot. And so in this moment, I'm going to orient to, it may be not a good outcome. And if we get there, we'll handle it. And for right now, I'm going to orient to, what can we do to help us get there? What can we do right now? And so I just kept bringing myself, and sometimes all we could do is just sit and breathe and comfort each other, or try to comfort her. And so that was really what helped me feel a more of a sense of ease about the whole thing. Is there was a level of presencing myself, a level of accepting what is, not necessarily endorsing or feeling like enthusiastic about it, but just, this is the reality of what is, and not letting myself get too far down the road of what could be just yet. So that's how I sort of in that moment oriented to not relaxation, not joyfulness, but just a little more space, a little more ease in it.
I love that. I'm glad you brought that up, presence.
Mm-hmm.
And what I heard in that and related to too was with my ease and what I'm doing is like, it's like, what is the opposite? Like, what could we be doing instead?
Mm-hmm.
And it's anything that brings us out of presence. So I'm thinking of like worrying about consequences, or thinking about like what we could have done.
Mm-hmm.
And in my work scenario example, it is like, I could be thinking about like, kind of like having a feeling like the other shoe's gonna drop, as if like my worry or my enthusiasm or adrenaline kind of motivation is going to keep all that at bay, so everything's fine. And I think about that in terms of control, like what within your control and what's out of your control. Mm-hmm. And I think I have some of that internal dialogue to help me be at ease, is to be in the present moment. Mm-hmm. And that's what's like, helping me, like it's actually helping me do better at the work I'm doing, because I'm letting go of all of the other busy thoughts that I don't need in my head about all the what ifs.
Yeah.
And I could hear some of that in your story, is like, you're not sitting there thinking about the what ifs. It's like the opposite of where you could have gone if you weren't present.
Yeah.
That creates the dis-ease.
Yeah. And I think it's an important thing to note is that it is really just sort of focusing your attention on that what is. Because if you think about the amount, and I think we've talked about this, but the amount of energy it takes to hold all of those possibilities and all of the things you might do. And I really see that this is what gets us in trouble and creates a lot of anxiety for people, is there's so much energy put into all of these possible things that might happen that usually don't, that it distracts us and makes our performance not as good with the thing that we want to be focusing on.
Yeah. And in terms of performance, like you said, I mean, being what you did to be present in that situation, you know, for yourself, you created more ease. And when we create ease for ourselves, it creates, I mean, what you wanted is to help comfort, you said, comfort your mother-in-law, comfort your partner.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like by being present, all of that was like accessible.
Yeah. And it was. And I noticed, you know, my habit nature in that situation, you know, I work a lot with people. We've both talked about this a lot, about this idea of becoming a little more comfortable with what's uncomfortable. And I've recognized that for me, I'm okay with my own discomfort. I'm not okay. It's harder for me with other people's discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And so even just being able to allow my partner's fear, anxiety, sadness, anger about the situation, that's a hard one for me to be with, is other people's anger, and not become reactive.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big one. And so, yeah, I think it's all, and that was where I was experiencing that ease. And even, you know, going on 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night and still feeling like I had the energy to get through the day. And I was able to maintain doing at least 10 minutes of stretching in the morning. You know, I did let my daily walk go for that week. But, you know, that sense of presence and just a little enough ease to be like, okay, I have the wherewithal to do the very basics to maintain my own self-care as well, so that I'm not falling apart. As did he, you know, like normally he probably would have been crippled with back pain based on what was experienced, and we both got through it. So yeah, it was a big shift in the way that both of us would have normally interacted in that situation. And I'll say he's not like an active practitioner of a lot of this stuff. Just from being around me, he absorbs some of it and does practice some of it, but it's, you know, not on the same level. And so I think that's another important thing, is sometimes just our ability to shift can help shift everything around us.
Yeah, that's so true. It's so true. And that's the power or control that we have, right? Because we can't control others or the situations that are coming at us, but we can control how we react, even though, you know, sometimes it can be harder than others. So I'm wondering, I'm curious, when you said that, you know, being like, you can handle your difficult emotions, but handling other people's difficult emotions is harder. You know what supported you this time? Like, what helped you allow ease for yourself in those moments?
Yeah, I think, again, I think the presencing, I think leaning into empathy and just allowing myself to really put my own comfort aside and recognizing, like, this is his mother and this feels very real. And so the behavior that changed is, I recognize it really is out of my control. I really don't know what's going to happen. And so I can't really offer the reassurance that I would normally feel compelled to. But what I can say is, I'm here with you. Whatever happens, we're together. We're going to get through it. We're going to do whatever we can to help her. And, you know, and just so again, it was just acknowledging what is true and real in this moment, which is we don't know yet. So hopefully she'll be okay. And if not, we're here together. Right. And we're going to get through it. And that, I believe, is true. And I know that he does too. And so just coming back again and again to what is real and true right now, and how can I orient to that, and just then notice, like, just noticing, oh, I feel really uncomfortable with, I see he's getting angry. I see he's getting really profoundly sad. And acknowledging, I'm not sure how to help right now, but I'm here. You know, so just even acknowledging my own discomfort or my own, I think that's another thing that many of us tend to feel like we need to have the answer. We need to provide the solution. We need to rescue people from their own discomfort, and just allowing myself not to take that responsibility was, I think, a big one. So that's another thing I think we've talked about a little bit is, you know, radical personal responsibility. And so allowing myself to be responsible for myself and to be there for him, but not feel responsible for his feelings was also something that I recognize now looking back that I was tapping into.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. I think that's really insightful. And what I was hearing is that you were just naming all the things that would typically give you dis-ease.
Yeah.
And over time, you've built awareness around those things and you've turned towards, the difficulty, or seen that your struggle is with wanting to control how other people feel, or thinking that you have control over how other people feel versus, and I think that thread is, or it's definitely in my same experience with ease and dis-ease. To look at both sides all the time is, if we can't find ease, then what is causing the dis-ease, and can we, welcome that in or turn towards that? And I think that's what I've been doing, but back to, in a way where I'm questioning, is it real in this moment?
Yeah.
What you were saying about that. Is that I'm looking at the dis-ease when I feel, so for me, I'm doing some work task and I have an anxious feeling in my chest. I know other people that have anxiety, that are treated for anxiety. And I was always like, they have that, I don't. But the more I'm in touch with it, kind of how I grew up was that kind of type A personality. And we've talked about this perfectionism and always needing to be right and do things well. And I just always have this kind of and people are like, oh, I'm energetic or something, but I'm like, really? It's like some low level of anxiety that's running in my chest all the time that I'm protecting. It's really, because I turn to what's my fear here? What am I protecting? And I'm protecting, I want everything to be okay, whether it's people or a situation or a work product or whatever it is. And so how do I, in the moment, come into the moment and be like, well, right now it is okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or right now, I don't have control over what someone else is going to perceive this. If I'm working on some work product, I don't know how people are going to perceive it. And so instead of thinking about how they're going to perceive it and is it going to be up to standards, I just kind of let that go. And I'm trying to I'm even reflecting as I'm talking, how do I let it go? How do I really because I think that's the hard part is it's a habit pattern. It's a tendency to have that anxiety kind of rush happening. And I lived on that rush for years. And then I got to calm down a little bit and be like, why? I just don't want that all the time anymore. It's because it feels so good to be at ease. And just so calm, let's maybe talk about how it feels to be at ease. Do you think that's helpful?
Yeah, it is. And there's a couple of things I want to revisit about what you're talking about, but we can come back to that if you want, or we can talk about it first.
No, you go first on what we're talking about now.
Okay. So I just want to name it. Sounds like a couple of things you're doing, and you can articulate in more nuanced what's happening here, but it sounds like there's a recognition of the unhelpful thoughts and maybe kind of separating the truth from just the thought or yourself from the thought. Right? Recognizing I'm not my thoughts, that kind of thing. And then it also sounds like, and we've talked a little bit about this, about both of us, the work that we've done with nervous system regulation and dysregulation, and recognizing that perhaps there's some nervous system dysregulation and signs of I'm in danger, that fight or flight response, and then looking for cues of safety right now in this moment. What is real? What is true? What danger am I in? How can I reassure myself that I have safety, I belong, those things. So it sounds like maybe on a subtle, even maybe unconscious level, that's part of what you're doing. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's completely right. So it's, really the whole that I'm telling myself is like, I'm just like reevaluating the risk in the moment. That if I ever catch myself like feeling extra like anticipatory about something, or like my body's sensing it as like a high risk situation,
Right.
which is creating for me the anxious feelings in my chest and my kind of like, and then the nervous system response of like higher adrenaline and cortisol and things. And so just reorienting to the present moment and being like there's no tiger here.
Right.
Like kind of reevaluating the risk and realizing that these things that I'm doing are not high risk things. You know, like if let's say I did make a mistake that we'll talk about something that seems high risk to most people. Payroll. Like let's say I screwed up payroll and someone didn't get paid what they should have gotten paid that pay period. And that would be like bad, right?
Yeah.
Like that would have consequences. But, you know, when I center in the moment, I'm actually doing it. I'm like, you know, I could fix it.
Yeah.
You know, like I could fix it. So a lot of the things that my subconscious as I'm working or my habit patterns perceive as like a high risk situation, I'm trying to what I'm really doing is repatterning to just lower the perceived risk that I see everywhere. I think we've talked about before, like over time in like careers, I think people and clients that we've had, you can develop over time. And once you've done something for a really long time, the perceived risk seems lower because you are like, oh, I've done that a million times. But for me, it was just like this internalized pattern of just my way of being and not really my conscious thoughts thinking like, oh, this is high risk because I know it's not. But coming back into the present moment, accessing that feeling of ease in my body, that I can just be present and enjoy what I'm doing. And maybe not enjoy, you know, I want to go back to that too, that it's not always like what you were saying. It's not about like a joyful feeling, or it's not that I'm relaxed, or it's just that I'm at ease and I just got rid of the anxious feelings, but I'm doing the same thing. And suddenly, like in the nervous systems speak, I have access to the full part of my brain and creativity and connection, where before I didn't because I was in this anxious state. So that's why I can complete whatever I'm completing with a more open mind. And when I switch in between to the next project, I have a clear space about even what I need to do next.
Yeah, I think
because
that's
I'm present.
Yeah, I think that's an important part that you bring up, is the access to the different parts of your brain and how that creative part kind of goes offline when you're in that fight or flight anxious stage. And so you see much more limited possibility from that anxiety driven place. And as you can tap into this ease, there are possibilities that you would have never seen that suddenly arise that help solve your problems or create new paths forward. And also, that sounds like this is maybe a good segue into that, you know, talking about what does that feel like?
Yeah. Well, I described a little bit about me, that the fluttering in my chest, that it's an obvious, what I related to like adrenaline or cortisol, that I have like an urgency to act. I'm leaning forward slightly. Sometimes I'm furrowing my brow. Like that's what it like looks like. And then being at ease, I lean back. I'm more like centered, my head over my heart over my pelvis, kind of upright with my shoulders a little bit more down and relaxed, fuller breaths. And I just really have this sense of stillness inside compared to that kind of high energy fluttering that I usually feel.
Yeah.
How about you?
So similar. And I think one of the metaphors I like to use is this idea of like, if you think about the nervous system being a gas and brake pedal, so that dis-ease kind of feels like you're flooring the gas, but you still have your foot on the brake, to me a little bit. Like it's like there's this urge to action, but maybe inability to really do anything. And so what it feels like to me is just sort of taking your foot, easing up off the gas a little bit. And so I also noticed that I sort of relax down and back. Where I tend to feel it is a softening in my belly and in my sort of glute to hip area, sort of softens and settles down a little. I feel more connected to earth, more connected to my seat. I feel a little heavier in my bottom half, just more grounded. That sense of stillness. I feel a little bit more softening throughout my body, or expansion, spaciousness. And just that impulse to take action or to do anything just softens. And I feel like I can just be I don't need to do, I can just be, even as I'm doing, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, all of that resonates with me too. That whole spaciousness. And it's like, what you explaining that made me think about what was I noticing and what was I not noticing? Because it was more like what was happening in the rest of my body besides just my chest, because I had such a focus on my chest where the absence of the fluttering. So I love that idea of, paying attention to your sit bones and like what's happening there, that a lot of us hold lots of tension there and like don't ever, that's one area anyway for me that I was like blindsided with, that I had no idea. I know I like held my breath or held my gut would tighten, like my stomach, but I didn't realize I was like gripping or like holding my hips in.
Yeah.
And what it feels like to relax that area and feel like with that relaxation, that groundedness you mentioned.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I think a lot of us have that and don't. I also didn't recognize that. And the way that I did recognize it, I'll invite, for those of you that are in a place where you're maybe sitting or can do this, I'll invite, let's do a little together. But the way that it helped me recognize was to really actually do the opposite, really clench in.
Yeah.
Like really tighten those muscles as tight as you can. Like if you're, hold them tight, 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 and then relax and just let it go. And notice the difference there. And now notice how maybe what feels normal to you feels like in comparison to both of these states. And see if you can just consciously take a breath and let it relax again or a little more.
It helps me to do it a couple times, like to tense.
Yeah. Yeah. Do it 2 or 3 times.
Because I think like every time I do it, I can find a little bit more relaxation.
Yeah.
And then I really notice like, oh, I'm somewhere right in the middle there.
Yeah. So I'll invite you to, anyone who's listening, just play with that. Do it several times. Do it, throughout the week perhaps, and just notice like what is your baseline? And where else in your body might you want to play with this idea? You can tense and release any muscle.
Yeah.
So,
and then how does it support you? Because that's what I like connecting the dots to. Like, so what? Now what is one of like the sayings that I like working with. It's like, so what? My hips are more relaxed, but like to pay attention to what that does for you. Like it makes right now, I can just say that feeling of groundedness and more steadiness. Like I feel, and we act from our soma or our bodies. At Rosal and I, are somatic based coaches. So we have a lot of training in this in language, but just to explain a little more, like this one exercise that we do is like, let's say you have something that a conversation you want to talk to someone about, and it's going to be a hard conversation. And you can try 3 poses on. So this is another little exercise. So imagine whatever it is you're going to say. And if you're standing up, we're not going to stand up right now, but you can stand up. But put your arm out like a limp noodle. I call it the limp noodle, and be like, oh, say the thing you're going to say. It's all limpy. And then the opposite, sometimes our nature is to like then make a really hard fist and put your fist out and then say the thing you're going to say.
Yeah. And really tight, rigid
and really
arm.
Tighten it. Yeah. And in both of those postures, it's easy for us to get knocked off balance. Like if we do this with clients where they're standing up, and we can actually, practice that and how your feet are, like when you're doing those postures that you get knocked over, versus the third posture is you find a posture of powerful ease and extension. You can extend your hand in what feels like ease, and you feel grounded in your, so back to the pelvis, feeling grounded in your seat, and then say the thing you want to say.
Yeah. And I'll say I think this can even extend beyond conversation. If there's action if there's a habit you tend to be in, a way of doing things, you can think about, how do I do it from this posture? How do I do it from this posture?
Yeah. And so that pelvis relaxation thing, I was just trying to say is, that power, it helps you in any, like you said, whether it's a conversation or a state of mind, like your body really shifts the way you think and your beliefs and how in your actions. It's so underrated and it's so handy and useful.
Yeah. I feel like there's so much more that we could say about that. But maybe that's another episode.
Yeah. Yes. We can go I think we could just do like a somatic postures play around maybe sometime.
Maybe.
Because I find those to be the most powerful. Like really the three that I just said, the limp noodle, the hard, and then the powerful ease. It's it was such a mind opener for me. And then the clients that I've worked with, because you're like, oh, I'm limp noodle. And then it gives you language too, to describe the state of how you're approaching whatever it is. Yeah, it's fun to play with.
So where are we in our conversation?
I was thinking about the ease and I started thinking of, you know where I was going? My next thought was with this was going back to the what's in your control or out of your control. Because I think of the dis-ease, the opposite again, the dis-ease of a lot of the dis-ease is, you know, that what pulls you into the future, what pulls you into the past. And I think for me it is, you know, and for lots of humans, it's like thinking about what you could have control. It's that wishing you would have done something different in the past, as if you could have controlled the situation. Or wanting to control what's happening. So you're thinking, you know, this, and this, rather than, I mean, I'm just going back to your situation.
Well, and I think
being like with.
Yeah. And I want to take a moment just to clarify. I think that there is use in reviewing past actions for this is how I would like to improve that. So you can mentally rehearse new behaviors that you want to incorporate for the future. And so we don't want to suggest that you should never think about the past or never plan for the future. But I think there's a distinction between having a review and planning out, okay, these are behaviors that I want to incorporate or practice so that for next time I can behave more intentionally, versus just ruminating over and over and over and over again and beating yourself up for the things that you did wrong. I think that there's a difference there. And so I just want to clarify that part while this is present.
Yeah. And that brings up another like tip for me when I'm like actually in the moment to catch myself, to be like, oh, why am I over like assigning this risk to be higher than it actually is the repetition of thought. So you said like, if you're rehashing something from the past, or if I'm thinking about something in the future and I hear like repetitive thoughts, I'm like, oh, I'm still thinking about that. Is that even like a thing? You know, and then becoming present again. But that brought up something I think new for me. A new thought in this conversation is about, can you be present? Because, you know, you should plan. There's things in life you have to plan ahead, or you have to think about something in the past to learn or do differently. Can you do that from a place of presence?
I think so.
So you're still present.
I think so.
Even though you're...
Yeah, I think so. And I think part of the way that I do that is, as I'm thinking about it, I'm allowing myself to re-experience the sensations and to, it's interesting. So I think I'm sort of like living through it again, and then allowing the experience to happen sort of internally in real time, and then, but slowing it down so that I can say, oh, this is what I'm experiencing right now. As I relive this conversation, I'm noticing, you know, these sensations in my body or these thoughts arise. And then I can slow it down and examine the thought, or, oh, those are warning signs that these sensations in my body are warning signs that I'm going down a path of reactivity that I don't want to be in. And so can I start to bring my attention to that so the next time it comes up, I can notice it sooner? So that's sort of how I do it. And I feel like that is then being present with what's happening now as I remember, right? As opposed to just ruminating on the thought, which feels less like presence.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about for you? How do you relate to that?
Yeah. I was thinking of like planning for the future as an example. Cause I think the same thing, what you just described was you were assessing the way your body felt, remembering the memory and being like, oh, what is hard? What is difficult? You know, whatever it is. So you are present. So I think I'm just thinking about continuing to play around with the idea of, whatever it is your mind is thinking about, whether it's past or present, how can you bring it in so you're paying attention to the present moment, that you're doing it with presence?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking about planning ahead, like I'm thinking of planning a vacation, like I'm planning a trip. But how do I feel in my body right now? And sometimes, I do get like lost and, looking at the hotels and looking at this but be like, oh, and just remembering to breathe and get back in my body and be like, how does that? And then that's actually how we talked about in our last episode, is like, how do you make choices that align with your yes?
Yep.
Is that I was making choices for my future, but I was doing it in the present moment. And I was really listening for my yeses and nos.
Yeah.
To help me drive those decisions that I was making.
Yeah.
And rather than being all forward thinking and just like being 100% focused on what was going to happen, I was really in the present moment to drive my actions. So that's one example.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. Thank you for that. It's a nice reminder of what we worked on last time. And also the reminder that our brains like to predict and they're not very good at it. And so we might, if we're making the decisions based strictly on what we think we want or what we think the experience or result will be, it's not going to be as accurate as like, well, when I'm orienting to that thing right now in this moment, thinking about what it'll be, how is my body responding? So that's a good distinction of how to be present even with the future.
Yeah. And I just want to play around with that now, is playing around with like, whenever I'm projecting in the, whatever the task I'm doing, a lot of the tasks are future oriented, no matter what it is, because there's going to be an outcome of the task. I mean, that is really what I'm doing with my whole going back into ease, is just being present with the thing I'm working on. I was writing a job description. And at first I was thinking about like, okay, when am I going to get this posted? What, like all these other thoughts are going through my head while I'm writing the job description. Like, oh, I got to get it approved first. And when is that meeting? And then, is the salary range the right one? And let me check these other things. But just coming in the present moment, be like, I'm writing this paragraph about this job, like to attract the right person that I want. How would I want to describe that? And so then it's more enjoyable. Back to that, like it's more enjoyable for me to do anything in the present moment, because I think being at ease is more enjoyable.
Yeah.
I think that's
my
global statement for me. I'm just finding that it's like worth the practice, because it's an enjoyable practice to allow myself. It's like a gift I'm giving myself.
Yeah.
I feel like every time I allow myself to experience ease, I do kind of take a breath, and I'm like, wow, like it's just such a gift. And with that,
I feel like, is it time to move into some kind of practice, or is there more to say about this?
I feel good about it. I want to open up to see if you have any other.
I feel good. I mean, as always, I'm always curious to see if anybody who's listening has anything they want to add or questions they want to ask. But so that invitation is always extended.
Yes.
But between us here right now, I feel good with where we are.
Yeah, me too. And if you feel like you do have questions or want to learn more or talk about other topics, enter them in the comments wherever you're listening to this. Our email addresses are in there somewhere for you in the description that you can email us. But we would love to bring you into the conversation actively. So I just want to ditto that, Rosa, your message. Before we move into the little guided practice here at the end to set us all on our way, I just invite us all to, how we open this is like with the ease, is what was the statement that landed for you? And just take a big, deep breath in, close your eyes and say that statement to yourself. Give yourself that gift. All right. So we're ready for a little guided practice.
Yes.
I'll be guiding it today. So everyone, you just get comfy. Get it into a comfortable spot. If you are driving or walking, of course, feel free to keep your eyes open. But if you can do so, I encourage you to close your eyes and just begin to settle into your body. You can feel the floor or whatever is underneath your feet and let it support you. Feel that groundedness. We can move into the pelvis and let's just do that tightening again. So tighten, tighten, tighten your pelvis. Try and squeeze in your hips as you're holding your breath. And then when you can't hold it anymore, just relax on an exhale, letting it all go. And let's do that 2 more times. So let's together take a deep breath in and tighten, tighten, tighten that pelvis. Tighten those hips together, tighten your gut. And when you can't hold it anymore, let it all go. Let that area just spread out and relax. All right, once more, take a big inhale and tighten, tighten, tighten your hips, your pelvis, your gut. And then let it all go. And just sit and breathe for a couple of breaths, noticing what feels different. Just get curious about that experience. How do you feel now? I'm going to ask you to shift your breath to breathe slower and deeper into your body. So see what that feels like for you. What does it feel like to invite the breath deeper and more slowly into your body? Where can you feel the rise and fall of your breath? Can you feel it in the front of your chest? Can you feel it in the expansion and contraction of your rib cage? Do you feel any movement in your hips or your pelvis with these slower, deeper breaths? Can you feel any sensations in your legs or even all the way down to your feet with the slower, deeper breaths? Shift your awareness to your head and notice if you feel anything different in the movement than your head, your eyes, your mouth, your jaw. As your body breathes more slowly and deeply. awareness into your heart. Notice what your heart feels like when you're breathing more slowly and deeply. And continue to focus on your heart as you breathe more slowly and deeply. And see if you can invite ease into your heart. And into your breath. What would it be like to breathe in ease into your heart? And what would it be like to exhale ease from your heart? And just play with that over the next couple of breaths. Seeing, imagining what it's like to breathe in ease into your heart. And exhale with ease out your heart. And whatever you're experiencing, know that it's completely okay. There is no right or wrong here. This is all a curious exploration of what's possible. Now I invite you to release the breath in the heart and allow your breath to go back to a normal, easy rhythm that feels natural to you, whatever that feels like in this moment. Find your natural rhythm of breath. And settle back in there, allowing it to bring you back into the moment, into your space of where you are. I always find it helpful to wiggle my toes and fingers before I open my eyes, which I invite you to do as well. To bring us back together in this present moment where we are complete. Thanks for listening. We want to hear from you. Drop us a comment on what you'd like to hear more about or questions you may have. We value your input and we'll work those topics into future episodes.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others. Like, subscribe, and leave a rating and review. It would go a long way in helping us spread the word about the Presence Hour podcast. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.